Who would have thought it? So much power, so close at hand. The dragon could feel the magic flowing into it, renewing it from second to second, in defiance of all boring physical laws. This wasn't the poor fare it had been given before. This was the right stuff. There was no end to what it could do with power like this. But first, it had to pay its respects to certain people. It sniffed the dawn air. It was searching for the stink of mines. Noble dragons don't have friends. The nearest they can get to the idea is an enemy who is still alive. The air became very still, so still that you could almost hear the slow fall of dust. The librarian swung on his knuckles between the endless bookshelves. The dome of the library was still overhead, but then it always was. It seemed quite logical to the librarian that, since there were aisles where the shelves were on the outside, then there should be other aisles in the space between the books themselves, created out of quantum ripples by the sheer weight of words. There were certainly some odd sounds coming from the other side of some shelving, and the librarian knew that if he gently pulled out a book or two, he would be peeking into different libraries under different skies. Books bend space and time. One reason the owners of those aforesaid little rambling, pokey secondhand bookshops always seem slightly unearthly is that many of them really are, having strayed into this world after taking a wrong turning in their own bookshops, in worlds where it is considered commendable business practice to wear carpet slippers all the time and open your shop only when you feel like it. You stray into L space at your peril. Very senior librarians, however, once they have proved themselves worthy by performing some valiant act of librarianship, are accepted into a secret order and are taught the raw arts of survival beyond the shelves we know. The librarian was highly skilled in all of them, but what he was attempting now wouldn't just get him thrown out of the order, but probably out of life itself. All libraries everywhere are connected in L space. All libraries everywhere. And the librarian, navigating by book sign carved on shelves by past explorers, navigating by smell, navigating even by the siren whisperings of nostalgia, was heading purposely for one very special one. There was one consolation. If he got it wrong, he'd never know it. Somehow, the dragon was worse on the ground. In the air, it was an elemental thing, graceful even when it was trying to burn you to your boots. On the ground, it was just a damn great animal. Its huge head reared against the gray of dawn, turning slowly. Lady Ramkin and Vines peered cautiously from behind a water trough. Vimes had his hand clamped over Errol's muzzle. The little dragon was whimpering like a kicked puppy and fighting to get away. It's a magnificent brute, said Lady Ramkin, in what she probably thought was a whisper. I do wish you wouldn't keep saying that, said Vimes. There was a scraping noise as the dragon dragged itself over the stones. I knew it wasn't killed, growled Vimes. There were no bits. It was too neat. It was sent somewhere by some sort of magic, I bet. Look at it. It's bloody impossible. It needs magic to keep it alive. What do you mean? Said Lady Ramkin, not tearing her gaze from its armored flanks. What did he mean? What did he mean? He thought fast. It's just not physically possible, that's what I mean, he said. Nothing that heavy should be able to fly or breathe fire like that. I told you. But it looks real enough. I mean, you'd expect a magical creature to be, well, gauzy.
Oh, it's real. It's real, all right, said Vimes bitterly. But supposing it needs magic like we need sunlight or food.
It's a thumivore, you mean?
I just think it eats magic, that's all,
said Vimes, who had not had a classical education.
I mean, all these little swamp dragons, always on the point of extinction. Suppose one day, back in prehistoric times, some of them found out how to use magic.
There used to be a lot of natural magic around once, said Lady Rampton thoughtfully.
There you are, then. After all, creatures use the air and the sea. I mean, if there's a natural resource around, something's going to use it, aren't they? Then it wouldn't matter about bad digestion and weight and wing size and so on, because the magic would take care of it. Wow.
But you need a lot, he thought. He wasn't certain how much magic you need to change the world enough to let tons of armored carcass flit around the sky like a swallow, but he bet it was a lot. All those thefts, someone had been feeding the dragon. He looked at the bulk of the unseen university library of magic books, the greatest accumulation of distilled magical power on the Discworld. And now the dragon had learned how to feed itself. He became terribly aware that Lady Ramkin had moved and saw to his horror that she was striding toward the dragon, chin stuck out like an anvil.
What the hell are you doing?
He whispered loudly. If it's descended from the swamp dragons, then I can probably control it, she called back. You have to look them in the eye and use a no-nonsense tone of voice. They can't resist a stern human voice. They don't have the willpower, you know. They're just big softies. To his shame, Vimes realized that his legs were going to have nothing to do with any mad dash to drag her back. His pride didn't like that, but his body pointed out that it wasn't his pride that stood a very reasonable chance of being thinly laminated to the nearest building. Through ears burning with embarrassment, he heard her say, "Bad boy!" The echoes of that stern injunction rang out across the plaza. Oh gods, he thought, is that how you train a dragon? Point them at the melted patch on the floor and threaten to rub their nose in it? He risked a peep over the horse trough. The dragon's head was swinging around slowly like a crane jib. It had some difficulty focusing on her. Right below it, Vimes could see the great red eyes narrow as the creature tried to squint down the length of its own nose. It looked puzzled. He wasn't surprised. "Sit!" bellowed Lady Ramkin in a tone so undisobeyable that even Vimes felt his legs involuntarily sag. "Good boy. I think I may have a lump of coke somewhere." She patted her pockets. Eye contact. That was the important thing. She really, Vimes thought, shouldn't have looked down even for a moment. The dragon raised one talon in a leisurely fashion and pinned her to the ground. As Vimes half rose in horror, Errol escaped from his grip and cleared the trough in one leap. He bounced across the plaza in a series of wing-whirring arcs, mouth gaping, emitting wheezing burps, trying to flame. He was answered with the tongue of blue-white fire that melted a streak of bubbling rock several yards long, but failed to strike the challenger. It was hard to pick him out of the air because, quite clearly, even Errol didn't know where he was going to be or what way up he was going to be when he got there. His only hope at this point lay in movement, and he vaulted and spun between the increasingly furious bursts of fire like a scared but determined random particle. The great dragon reared up with the sound of a dozen anchor chains being thrown into a corner and tried to bat the tormentor out of the air. Vime's legs gave in at that point and decided that they might allow themselves to be heroic legs for a while. He scurried across the intervening space, sword at the ready for what good it might do, grabbed Lady Ramkin by an arm and a handful of bedraggled ball gown, and swung her onto his shoulder. He got several yards before the essential bad judgment of this move dawned on him. He went, "Yeah!" His vertebrae and knees were trying to fuse into one lump. Purple spots flashed on and off in front of his eyes. On top of it all, something unfamiliar but apparently made of whalebone was poking sharply into the back of his neck. He managed a few more steps by sheer momentum, knowing that when he stopped, he was going to be utterly crushed. The Ramkins hadn't bred for beauty. They'd bred for healthy solidity and big bones, and they'd got very good at it over the centuries. A gout of livid dragon fire crackled into the flagstones a few feet away. Afterward, he wondered if he'd only imagined leaping several inches into the air and covering the rest of the distance to the horse trough at a respectable run. Perhaps in extremis, everyone learned the kind of instant movement that was second nature to Nobby. Anyway, the horse trough was behind him, and Lady Ramkin was in his arms, or at least was pinning his arms to the ground. He managed to free them and tried to massage a bit of life back. What did you do next? She didn't seem to be injured. He recalled something about loosening a person's clothing, but in Lady Ramkin's case, that might be dangerous without special tools. She solved the immediate problem by grabbing the edge of the trough and hauling herself upright. Right, she said. It's the slipper for you. Her eyes focused on Vimes for the first time. What the hell's going on? She began again, and then caught the scene over his shoulder. Oh, sod, she said. Pardon my Clatchian. Errol was running out of energy. The stubby wings were indeed incapable of real flight, and he was remaining airborne solely by flapping madly, like a chicken. The great talons swished through the air. One of them caught one of the plaza's fountains and demolished it. The next one swatted Errol neatly. He shot over Vime's head in a straight, rising line, hit a roof behind him, and slid down it. You've got to catch him, shouted Lady Ramkin. You must! It's vital! Vimes stared at her and then dived forward as Errol's pear-shaped body slithered over the edge of the roof and dropped. He was surprisingly heavy. Thank goodness, said Lady Ramkin, struggling to her feet. They explode so easily, you know. It could have been very dangerous. They remembered the other dragon. It wasn't the exploding sort. It was the killing people kind. They turned slowly. The creature loomed over them, sniffed at them, and then, as if they were of no importance at all, turned away. It sprang ponderously into the air and, with one slow flap of its wings, began to scull leisurely away down the plaza and up and into the mists that were rolling over the city. Vimes was currently more concerned with the smaller dragon in his hands. Its stomach was rumbling alarmingly. He wished he'd paid more attention to the book on dragons. Was a stomach noise like this a sign they were about to explode? Or was the point you had to watch out for the point when the rumbling stopped? We've got to follow it, said Lady Ramkin. What happened to the carriage? Vimes waved a hand vaguely in the direction that, as far as he could tell, the horses had taken in their panic. Errol sneezed a cloud of warm gas that smelled worse than something walled up in a cellar, pawed the air weakly, licked Vime's face with a tongue like a hot cheese grater, struggled out of his arms, and trotted away. Where's he off to? Boomed Lady Ramkin, emerging from the mists, dragging the horses behind her. They didn't want to come. Their hooves were scraping up sparks, but they were fighting a losing battle.
He's still trying to challenge it, said Vimes. You'd think he'd give in, wouldn't you?
They fight like blazes, said Lady Ramkin, as he climbed onto the coach. It's a matter of making your opponent explode, you see?
I thought, in nature, the defeated animal just rolls on its back in submission, and that's the end of it,
said Vimes, as they clattered after the disappearing swamp dragon. Wouldn't work with dragons, said Lady Ramkin. Some daft creature rolls on its back. You disembowel it. That's how they look at it. Almost human, really. The clouds were clustered thickly over Ankh-Morpork. Above them, the slow golden sunlight of the Discworld unrolled. The dragon sparkled in the dawn as it trod the air joyously, doing impossible turns and rolls for the sheer delight of it. Then it remembered the business of the day. They'd had the presumption to summon it. Below it, the rank wandered from side to side up the street of small gods. Despite the thick fog, it was beginning to get busy. What do you call them things? Like thin stairs? Said Sergeant Colin. Ladders, said Carrot. What of them about? Said Nobby. He mooched over to the nearest one and kicked it. Oi! A figure struggled down, half buried in a string of flags. What's going on? Said Nobby. The flag bearer looked him up and down. Who wants to know, Tiddler? He said. Excuse me, we do, said Carrot, looming out of the fog like an iceberg. The man gave a sickly grin. Well, it's the coronations, ain't it? He said. Got to get the streets ready for the coronation. Got to have the flags up. Got to get the old bunting out, haven't we? Nobby gave the dripping finery a jaundiced look. Doesn't look that old to me, he said. It looks new. What are them fat, saggy things on that shield? Those are the royal hippos of Ankh, said the man proudly. Reminders of our noble heritage. How long have we had a noble heritage then? Said Nobby. Since yesterday, of course. You can't have a heritage in a day, said Carrot. It has to last a long time. If we haven't got one, said Sergeant Colin. Oh, I bet we'll soon have had one. My wife left me a note about it all these years, and she turns out to be a monarchist. He kicked the pavement viciously. Huh, he said. A man knocks his pipes out for 30 years to put a bit of meat on the table, but all she's talking about is some boy who gets to be king for 5 minutes' work. No, know what was for my tea last night? Beef dripping sandwiches. This did not have the expected response from the two bachelors. Caw, said Nobby. Real beef dripping, said Carrot. The kind with the little crunchy bits on top and shiny blobs of fat. Can't remember when I last addressed the crust on a bowl of dripping, mused Nobby, in a gastronomic heaven.
With just a bit of salt and pepper, you've got a meal fit for a king. Don't even say it,
warned Colin.
The best bit is when you stick the knife in the crack and crack the fat, and all the brownie gold stuff bubbles up,
said Carrot dreamily.
A moment like that is worth a king. Shut up, shouted Colin. You're just, what the hell is that?
They felt the sudden downdraft, saw the mist above them roll into coils that broke against the house walls. A blast of colder air swept along the street and was gone.
It was like something gliding past, up there somewhere, said the sergeant. He froze. Here, you don't think. We saw it killed, didn't we?
Said Nobby urgently.
We saw it vanish,
said Carrot. They looked at one another, alone and damp in the mist-shrouded street. There could be anything up there. The imagination peopled the dank air with terrible apparitions. And what was worse was the knowledge that nature might have done an even better job.
No,
said Colin.
It was probably just some big wading bird or something. Isn't there anything we should do?
Said Carrot.
Yes, said Nobby. We should go away quickly. Remember Gaskin? Maybe it's another dragon, said Carrot. We should warn people and
no, said Sergeant Colin vehemently,
because A, they wouldn't believe us, and B, we've got to king now. It's his job, dragons.
So right, said Nobby.
He'd probably be really angry. Dragons are probably, royal animals, like deer. A man could probably have his tridlings plucked just for thinking about killing one when there's a king around. Makes you glad you're coming, said Colin. Commoner, corrected Nobby. That's not a very civic attitude,
Carrot began. He was interrupted by Errol. The little dragon came trotting up the middle of the street, stumpy tail high, his eyes fixed on the clouds above him. He went right by the rank without giving them any attention at all. Oh, by the way, tridlings are a short and unnecessary religious observance performed daily by the holy balancing dervishes of others, according to the dictionary of eye-watering words.
What's up with him?
Said Nobby. A clatter behind them introduced the Ramkin coach.
Men?
Said Vimes hesitantly, peering through the fog.
Definitely, said Sergeant Colin. Did you see a dragon go past, apart from Errol? Well,
said the sergeant, looking at the other two.
Sort of, sir. Possibly. It might have been.
Then don't stand there like a lot of boobies, said Lady Ramkin. Get in. Plenty of room inside. There was. When it was built, the coach had probably been the marvel of the day, all plush and gilt and tasseled hangings. Time, neglect, and the ripping out of the seats to allow its frequent use to transport dragons to shows had taken their toll, but it still reeked of privilege, style, and, of course, dragons.
What do you think you're doing? Said Colin as it rattled off through the fog.
Waving, said Nobby, gesturing graciously to the billows around them.
Disgusting, this sort of thing, really, mused Sergeant Colin. People going around in coaches like this when there's people with no roofs to their heads. It's Lady Ramkin's coach, said Nobby. She's all right. Well, Yes, but what about her ancestors, eh? You don't get big houses and carriages without grinding the faces of the poor a bit. You're just annoyed because your missus has been embroidering crowns on her undies, said Nobby. That's got nothing to do with it, said Sergeant Colin indignantly. I've always been very firm on the rights of man. Handorf, said Carrot. Yeah, right, said the sergeant uncertainly. But all this business about kings and lords is against basic human dignity. We're all born equal. It makes me sick. Never heard you talk like this before, Frederick, said Nobby. It's Sergeant Cullen to you, Nobby. Sorry, Sergeant.
The fog itself was shaping up to be a real Ankh-Morpork autumn gumbo. Note, like a pea souper, only much thicker, fishier, and with things in it you'd probably rather not know about. Vimes squinted through it as the droplets buckled down to a good day's work, soaking him to the skin.
I can just make him out, he said. Turn left here.
Any ideas where we are? Said Lady Roundkin.
Business district somewhere,
said Vimes shortly. Errol's progress was slowing a bit. He kept looking up and whining.
Can't see a damn thing above us in this fog, he said. I wonder if...
The fog, as if in acknowledgement, lit up. Ahead of them, it blossomed like a chrysanthemum and made a noise like whoomph.
Oh no, moaned Vimes. Not again.
All the cups of integrity well and truly suffused, intoned Brother Watchtower.
Oi, suffused all well.
The waters of the world, are they abjured?
Yea, abjured full mightily.
Have the demons of infinity been bound with many chains?
Damn,
said Brother Plaster.
There's always something.
Brother Watchtower sagged.
Just once it would be nice if we could get the ancient and timeless rituals right, wouldn't it? You better get on with it.
Won't it be quicker, Brother Watchtower, if I just did it twice next time? Said Brother Plasterer. Brother Watchtower gave this some grudging consideration. It seemed reasonable.
All right, he said. Now get back down there with the others. And you should call me acting Supreme Grandmaster. Understand?
This did not meet with what he considered to be a proper and dignified reception among the brethren.
No one said anything to us about you being acting Supreme Grand Master,
muttered Brother Doorkeeper.
Well, that's all you know, because I bloody well am. Because Supreme Grandmaster asked me to open the lodge on account of him being delayed with all the coronation work,
said Brother Watchtower haughtily.
If that doesn't make me acting Supreme Grand Bloody Master, I'd like to know what it does, all right?
I don't see why, muttered Brother Doorkeeper. You don't have to have a grand title like that. You could just be called something like, well, Rituals Monitor. Yeah, said Brother Plaster. Don't say why you should give yourself airs. You ain't even been taught the ancient and mystic mysteries by monks or anything.
We've been hanging around for
hours, too, said Brother Doorkeeper. That's not right. Oh, I thought we'd get rewarded. Brother Watchtower realized that he was losing control. He tried wheedling diplomacy.
Oh, I'm sure Supreme Grand Master will be along directly,
he said.
Let's not spoil it all now, eh, lads? Arranging that fight with the dragon and everything, getting it all off right. That was something, wasn't it? We've been through a lot, right? It's worth waiting just a bit longer, okay?
The circle of robed and cowled figures shuffled in grudging agreement. Okay, fair enough. Yeah. Certainly. Okay, if you say so. It began to creep over Brother Watchtower that something wasn't right, but he couldn't quite put a name to it. Oh, he said, brothers? They too shifted uneasily. Something in the room was setting their teeth on edge. There was an atmosphere. Brothers? Repeated Brother Watchtower, trying to reassert himself.
We are all here, aren't we?
There was a worried chorus of agreement. Of course we are. What's the matter? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. There it was again. A subtle wrongness about things that you couldn't quite put your finger on because your finger was too scared. But Brother Watchtower's troublesome thoughts were interrupted by a scrabbling sound on the roof. A few nubs of plaster dropped into the circle. Brothers? Repeated Brother Watchtower nervously. Now there was one of those silent sounds, a long buzzing silence of extreme concentration, and just possibly the indrawing of breath into lungs the size of haystacks. The last rats of Brother Watchtower's self-confidence fled the sinking ship of courage.
Brother Doorkeeper, if you could just unbolt the dread portal,
he quavered. And then there was light. There was no pain. There was no time. Death strips away many things, especially when it arrives at a temperature hot enough to vaporize iron, and among them are your illusions. The immortal remains of Brother Watchtower watched the dragon flap away into the fog, and then looked down at the congealing puddle of stone, metal, and miscellaneous trace elements that was all that remained of the secret headquarters. And of its occupants, he realized in the dispassionate way that is part of being dead. You go through your whole life and end up a smear swirling around like cream in a coffee cup. Whatever the gods' games were, they played them in a damn mysterious way. He looked up at the hooded figure beside him.
We never intended this, he said weakly. Honestly, no offense. We just wanted what was due to us.
A skeletal hand patted him on the shoulder, not unkindly, and Death said,
Congratulations.
Apart from the Supreme Grand Master, the only elucidated brother to be away at the time of the dragon was Brother Fingers. He'd been sent out for some pizzas. Brother Fingers was always the one sent out for takeaway food. It was cheaper. He'd never bothered to master the art of paying for things. When the guards rolled up just behind Errol, Brother Fingers was standing with a stack of cardboard boxes in his hands and his mouth open. Where the dread portal should have been was a warm, melted patch of assorted substances. Oh, my goodness, said Lady Ramkin. Vimes slid down from the coach and tapped Brother Fingers on the shoulder.
Excuse me, sir, he said. Did you by any chance see what...
When Brother Fingers turned toward him, his face was the face of a man who was hang gliding who has hang glided over the entrance to hell. He kept opening and shutting his mouth, but no words were coming out. Vimes tried again. The sheer terror frozen in Brother Finger's expression was getting to him.
If you would be so kind to accompany me to the yard, said Vimes, I have reason to believe that you.
He hesitated. He wasn't entirely certain what it was that he had reason to believe, but the man was clearly guilty. You could tell just by looking at him. Not perhaps guilty of anything specific, just guilty in general terms. Said Brother Fingers. Sergeant Cullen gently lifted the lid of the top box.
What do you make of it, Sergeant?
Said Vimes, stepping back.
It looks like a Clatchian huts with anchovies, sir,
said Sergeant Cullen knowledgeably.
I mean the man,
said Vimes wearily. Said Brother Fingers. Cullen peered under the hood.
Oh, I know him, sir, he said. Bangy Lightfoot Bogus, sir. He is a capo de Monte in the Thieves' Guild. I know him of old, sir. Sly little bugger. Used to work at the university. What, as a wizard? Said Vimes. Odd job man, sir. Gardening and carpentry and that. Oh, did he?
Can't we do something for the poor man? Said Lady Ramkin. Nobby saluted smartly.
I could kick him in the bullocks if you like, m'lady.
Said Brother Fingers, beginning to shake uncontrollably. While Lady Ramkin smiled the iron-hard blank smile of a high-born lady who is determined not to show that she has understood what has just been said to her.
Put him in the coach, you two, said Vimes. If it's all right with you, Lady Ramkin.
Sybil, corrected Lady Ramkin. Vimes blushed and plunged on.
It might be a good idea to get him indoors. Charge him with the theft of one book, to wit, The Summoning of Dragons. Right you are, sir, said Sergeant Cullen. The pizzas are getting cold, too. You know how the cheese goes all manky when it gets cold? And no kicking him either, Vimes warned. Not even where it doesn't show. Carrot, you come with me. Brother Fingers volunteered. And take Errol, added Vimes. He's driving himself mad here. Game little devil, I'll give him that. Marvelous when you come to think about it, said Colin. Errol was trotting up and down in front of the ravaged building, whining. Look at him, said Vimes. Can't wait to get to grips. His gaze found itself drawn, as though by wires, up to the rolling clouds of fog. It's in there somewhere, he thought. What are we going to do now, sir? Said Carrot, as the carriage rattled off. Not nervous, are you? Said Vimes. No, sir. The way he said it jogged something in Vimes' mind. No, he said. You're not, are you? I suppose it's being brought up by the dwarfs that did it. You've got no imagination. I'm sure I try to do my best, sir, said Carrot firmly. Still sending all your pay home to your mother? Yes, sir. You're a good boy. Yes, sir. So, what are we going to do, Captain Vimes? Carrot repeated. Vimes looked around him. He walked a few aimless, exasperated steps. He spread his arms wide and then flopped them down by his sides. How should I know? He said. Warn people, I guess. We'd better get over to the patrician's palace, and then
There were footsteps in the fog. Vimes stiffened, put his finger to his lips, and pulled Carrot into the shelter of a doorway. A figure loomed out of the billows.
Another one of them, thought Vimes. Well, there's no law about wearing long black robes and deep cowls. There could be dozens of perfectly innocent reasons why this person is wearing long black robes and a deep cowl and standing in front of a melted down house at dawn. Perhaps I should ask him to name just one.
He stepped out.
Excuse me, sir,
he began. The cowl swung around. There was a hiss of indrawn breath.
I just wonder if you would mind. After him, Lance Constable.
The figure had a good start. It scuttled along the street and had reached the corner before Vimes was halfway there. He skidded around it in time to see a shape vanish down an alley. Vimes realized he was running alone. He panted to a halt and looked back just in time to see Carrot jog gently around the corner.
What's wrong?
He wheezed.
Sergeant Collins said I wasn't to run,
said Carrot. Vimes looked at him vaguely. Then slow comprehension dawned.
Oh,
he said.
I see. I don't think he meant in every circumstance, lad.
He stared back into the fog.
Not that we had much of a chance in this fog and these streets.
Might have just been an innocent bystander, sir, said Carrot.
What, in Ankh-Morpork?
Yes, sir.
We should have grabbed him then, just for the rarity value,
said Vimes. He patted Carrot on the shoulder.
Come on, we better get along to the patrician's palace.
The king's palace, corrected Carrot.
What?
said Vimes, in his train of thought temporarily shunted. It's the king's palace now, said Carrot. Vimes squinted sideways at him. He gave a short, mirthless laugh.
Yeah, that's right,
he conceded.
Our dragon-killing king. Well done, that man.
He sighed.
They're not going to like this.